Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Inna Allaha ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi. This is the 91st verse from the 16th chapter of the Holy Quran. Verily, Allah enjoins justice and doing of good to others and giving like kindred, and forbids indecency and manifest evil and wrongful transgression. He admonishes you that you may take heed. لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى. This other verse is from Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 265. Render not vain your alms by taunt or injury. These two verses, which I have chosen to start with today, are referring to the different levels of doing goodness, and they are also an admonition inside them or after them that after we have done something good, we shouldn't follow it up by any transgression or any injury. Um, Explaining these verses in further in detail, I'll do that after, but they are in connection with the subject of morals and reformation, which the Holy Quran talks about. Last week, I spoke in my Dars al Quran about understanding morality because it believed that this subject matter is very important for Muslims to learn before we can reform ourselves. And in last week, I did speak about how there are morals and there should be balances in morals. And I referred to the fact that the promised Messiah, he spoke about how he finds in some people that there are a characteristic of humans that they may display some moral characteristics, some qualities, like for instance, they may be very generous, but at the same time, they may be very prone to getting angry. They may have other types of qualities which do not show that there is a balance in their characteristic. And then I went into description in detail about how the promised Messiah salam explained that the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had within him all of the moral qualities that can be found in a human being. And likewise, we should try our best to the best of our ability to follow those examples. And I gave a few examples of that, of the qualities of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today, or at this point, I would like to, before starting on the same subject in detail, but trying to be brief, to try to sort of give an overview of what the promised Messiah alayhi salam has explained in the philosophy of the teachings of Islam about these three stages of the reformation of man. And before I start on those explaining those three stages, I would like to give some other explanations on how we should go about applying those rules and following those rules, so that we can then properly develop those moral qualities, and we can properly understand and we can properly implement them in our life. We can put them into practice in our life. Without that, it is difficult. And that's why I wanted to just sort of go back to what I mentioned last week, in my Dars al-Quran, about how there is an imbalance. The promised Messiah alayhi salam talked about an imbalance that we can see in the nature of some people. And he also quoted from a poet that said that a person who doesn't, lay the brick, or the person who lays a brick crooked, even though that brick is built towards heaven and it reaches heaven, it will still be crooked. The foundation will make it crooked, that structure will become crooked. And what he was talking about was that person who is working towards God in all sincerity, but his foundation is crooked. He doesn't, he or she has not properly balanced out his morals. He has not gone from the stage one to the next stage. He has skipped it, or has gone here or there. So that's why I would like to first talk about the foundation, and about moralities, and how it is very important, because this is what the promised Messiah alayhi salam highlights in his teaching, and especially in the philosophy of the teaching of Islam. This also, this imbalance that we find, is also it's a reflection of the human nature, that sometime, we have weaknesses, and sometime we have hidden inside us sort of things that um, we see on our outside, that maybe we're doing one thing, but inside we're doing another. That is hypocrisy. Actually, that is the action of hypocrisy. And I just want to give some examples here, so we can understand this. That in this, sometimes, a musi, this can help us to give an example. And this should be, a musi is an example of, in a very high category of an Ahmadi. And that musi is supposed to be paying 10% of their wasiyat. And musi is not only supposed to be paying the higher chanda, but they're also supposed to be following morally much higher in all of the moral actions than other Ahmadis. And so if just for giving an example, if a musi is paying his 10% in wasiyat, but he is also, or she is not paying the chanda khudam or lajna or ansar membership at the prescribed rate, according to their financial income that they earn. So this is not according to the standard of them being musi. So they're in a category, but in fact, they look from one angle to be in a high category, but in fact, it shows up that they are, that in one other category, they actually are not being honest and showing exactly their income. This is by way of an example to understand that. And the other way we can understand this imbalance, which is a form of it can be also in a form of hypocrisy that is very clear. Sometimes it can be that person is sincerely, their morals, they may have not developed, and they may need to have more understanding about how to improve. But here I'm talking about how this falls in the area of hypocrisy. Another aspect can be that a person, for instance, can be very good in paying their chanda in all the forms, in all the categories, and they can also be serving. They can also be offering their prayers properly in that. But when it comes to their behavior towards their neighbors, when it comes to maybe their behavior at work, or could be their family, it's not like that very high and very respectable, behavior. And they may actually look down upon the people who they live around. And, this can also be something that we look in high office as well. If the person he's an office holder and he or she is holding an office, and they've taken a pledge to to serve religion and to serve their office the best that they can. But if they are, in the very instance they are looking at those who are under them as inferior to them, and they start, speaking with an arrogance that is very unbecoming to that office, and they're showing sort of a disrespect for those. They could be Jamaat members, they could be anyone who is working with them in their offices. This is not actually an attitude that is accepted in Islam. And I did mention this in one of my morning Dars al-Quran, that this is a relationship between the elders or those who are in higher offices, that they should have respect from the younger ones or those who are below them. But those who are in higher, they're also to respect the younger ones. And this is they're a Muslim if they do this. So that means that we shouldn't be hypocritical that saying we're Muslim and we're serving Jamaat, but when it comes to dealing with the Jamaat members, that we don't take into consideration their feelings, and we sometimes say things or we sometimes behave in sort of arrogant way which hurts people. This is something which can bring the Jamaat members away from the true serving the true religion, and or even understanding the true understanding of Islam. This can be a means to pushing people away. So on that note, I wanted to give a reference about hypocrisy, which our beloved Hazur Aidullah Tala bin Asr Aziz gave in Jalsa Salana, New Zealand. And he said that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also worried about his followers, that they may fall into the practice of idolatry. The tradition states that Abada bin Nasi told us about Shaddad bin Aus, that he was crying. When it was inquired from him as to why he was crying, he replied, I have remembered that something that I heard from the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that made me cry. I heard the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, I worry about my followers and about the hidden desires and idolatry. The narrator states that he asked O Prophet of Allah, do you think your followers will indulge in idolatry after you? So he was asking, will they follow idolatry? Idolatry is shirk. On this, the Apostle of Allah replied, yes, however, my followers will not start worshipping the sun or the moon or idols or stones, but they will indulge in hypocrisy in their daily actions, and they will suffer from hidden desires. So this is a quality of hypocrisy which will be Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the apostle of Allah. He is saying that this is equal to idolatry. And he explained that in that it will be a hidden desires that Muslims will have, and they will also have it will come out in the form of hypocrisy. And then he goes on to say that explaining this, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam explaining this, says that if any of them started the day in a state of fast, in some desire caused an interference with it, then he would abandon the fast and would be occupied with this. The Huzur in his speech then said, keep these matters in mind and look around you. The world is immersed in a lot of artificiality and pretense or show. Even the Muslims are not exempt from this. Some say their prayers to show off to others, and some go to perform their Hajj as a false pretense or as a show. So here, before finishing this quotation of our beloved Hazur, this is also another aspect of morality that is very important to understand, and that is why there is an underlying in hadith that Allah sees the hearts of the people. He doesn't look at their outer actions, but he sees their intention, their heart. Is it pure? And it might be that someone who is even offering prayer, now this is a hypocrisy, but it may be that someone is offering prayer and they are trying to show off, or someone is holding an office. They are there because they want to show off. They want to get fame. They want to have, you know, how many likes they have, how many followers they have, how many, you know, this and that they have. Similarly, in the worldly life, even in the, if we try to think about the honorable roles, there are so many of them. But of the very high, there are doctors, for instance. There may be doctors, many doctors who are very honorable, and they think that they get into this field because they want to serve humanity. And we have so many examples in Jamaat of people who have become doctors, and they are serving Jamaat through giving their time to help those in need. And but there may be many people who are, you know, they are, when they become doctors, they become only because they would like to have the fame. They would like to have this office for show, so that they can you know, get the higher status, the higher income, the higher respect. And similarly, even even in like other areas of religious duties, um, the or sorry, religious offices, as I already mentioned, people may be doing have a similar intention. So we should, as Huzur said, look out for this, because nowadays is a day and time of artificiality and pretense of show. And this doesn't need much to say about that. I think we all understand what kind of day and age that we are in. Like, for instance, doctors or lawyers are now would prefer after getting their degrees to become actors. So it sort of shows the, you know, it shows the extent of you know, the extent of why the person is getting education. What is the aim behind their getting this higher education? Then Hazur says in this address, very good points and helpful for us, is that there are many other hidden desires. As I have already mentioned, many forego their daily prayers in preferences to their worldly pursuits. In fact, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has already said that one who is fasting will break his fast to get involved in other affairs. The promised Messiah والسلام, has then said that the second evil is not to fulfill the rights of human beings. It is your duty to treat fellow human beings with affection. End all grievances, purify yourselves of malice and envy. So here, the promised Messiah is giving a very good advice, that if we want to be able to get to get rid of the evil, he's saying second evil, which is helping others or responding to the needs of others, then we should be able to we should give up our own natural you know, our own desires. And he further explains this by saying it is a fundamental principle that in order to create a peaceful atmosphere of love and brotherhood in our society, one has to sacrifice one's emotions. The more one is able to sacrifice one's feelings, the more his heart would be rid of all grievances and malice, and the more he would develop the emotions of love and affection. So, if a person, this is very important about morality here. And this is that if we tend to just focus on ourselves, even though we think that what we are doing intentionally is good for us, if we focus on ourselves to the extent that we exclude the needs of others, even we exclude, forget about outside family, we start excluding our parents, we start excluding our spouses and our children. We start doing this with an intention that we become somehow, is beneficial for ourselves. This is focusing on our own desires, and this is going into the area of ego. And here the Promised Messiah is giving a clear indication of how we can get rid of that, is that we sacrifice our emotions. That is the life or the world that we are living in. And if where emotions, persons, likings, and this and that are above everything else normally. And here, if we want to, create peace in society, then we should start to, bit by bit, we should start analyzing ourselves and looking at how we can get rid of some of the problems we have between each other, because we are maybe being too selfish. We are maybe not looking at the needs of others. And this, if we do this, will create peace in society. Now, the Promised Messiah, alayhi salatu wasalam, has said that a note about the khulq, or the morals, they give the idea, he says in the philosophy teaching of Islam, gives the ideas of a physical birth. Sorry, khalq gives the Arabic word khalq gives the idea of a physical birth, whereas the khulq gives the idea, its sense and meaning is that of the inner birth. An inner birth is perfected through moral development and not merely through the exercise of natural impulses. The khulq is meaning the moral qualities and the natural impulses. It should be pointed out that the common connection that morals merely mean meekness, courtesy, and humility is entirely mistaken. The truth is that corresponding to every physical action, there is an inner quality which is moral. So this is here, the Promised Messiah again is explaining how moralities are differentiated between the outer khalq, which is the outer natural impulses, or the actions that we do. If the actions that we do, the outer physic, which is characterized here, or given the name khalq, has as well with it motivation of the moral motivation inside, which is known as khulq, the inner birth, the inner moral intentions, the good intentions. Then what happens is there is a there is a moral action. Otherwise, any action which is devoid of the inner moral voice, which is telling to do this for reasoning, because they're looking at the situation and the time, the appropriate time, then that has the characteristics of morals. But if it doesn't, then it just is just an action that is very much like an animal. And the Promised Messiah here explains the characteristics of a man is that he desires to make progress, and therefore through following a true religion and keeping good keeping good company and conforming to good teachings, he converts his natural impulses into moral qualities. And here he says that no other animal is invested with this characteristic. So this is the defining line between the human beings, of how they're become more human and more sophisticated, whereas animals don't have that ability. They don't want to follow a true religion. They don't want to get around a good influential people that can help them to in their life to advance to much higher levels. this is which distinguishes us between human beings and animals. Now, this is this is a very beautiful point and a very important point that we must understand living in this society, whether we are inundated with this philosophy we don't know through the media or through what we read or through what we've been educated, whether we've gone through education here or in other parts of the world, or our children are going through education. But it's a matter of fact, it's very important to understand that nowadays science is trying to push this idea that persons, instincts, whether they're good or not, their desire, their impulses are something which they should act upon. But here the promised Messiah is clearly stating that this actually keeps a person more on the side of being like it is a characteristic only of an animal. But in religion, and Islam in particular, is trying to mold the person to have a moral quality, to restrain, not to suppress, only to restrain an action, so that that action will become, will have much more better benefit to them and to society, and they will have much higher success. Um, Anyhow, this point is very important, and the logic behind it is beautifully explained by the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, and that's why this subject is very important. Now, I would now like here to explain one important thing about morality, which is in connection here with the verses which I explained in the beginning, and that is that there can be a possibility that when we have any moral quality that we're doing that has a good intention, it's been carried out with reasoning and thinking, but it can happen that on certain occasions that the reasoning that we have, it may be limited, and we might that the moral quality that we have might actually turn out to be something harmful because we go in excess of that. And then in the verse which I recited in the beginning, Surah Al-Nahl, verse 91, verily Allah enjoins justice and doing of good to others and giving like kindred, and forbids indecency and manifest evil and wrongful transgression. Here I'll just quickly point out here what the promised Messiah is explaining from this verse is that it has three categories of doing good to others. And the first is that we do good so that we have return of good. This is one category, motivation behind doing good. The other category is a little bit more complicated, because he said that the Quran says that this is that person will be motivated so that they will have return of gratitude from someone or return of prayers. And he said that in this case, if somebody may turn against them and they are upset with them, then they might, the person who's giving the goodness might actually be offended, and their hidden ego, their hidden intention behind doing this good act was not pure, and it will then become, it will come out when person doesn't show gratitude, and they might become angered. And that's why I mentioned the verse which the promised Messiah mentioned, is that we should not render our arms with taunt or injury. We shouldn't give chanda, or we shouldn't help out other people with and then at the end, because they have rejected us, or they misbehave with us, that we turn back to them with anger. So this is what can happen, is that in the case of our showing our gratitude to or help to someone, we might in fact through our own hidden intentions, wanting something more from that, and then if we don't get it, it can spoil that intention that we have done. So this area is sort of complicated, and we should try to, when we do something, as Promised Messiah alayhi salam says, that sadaqah's meaning, root meaning is sidq, which means sincerity. We should be giving things sincerely. Okay, if someone, if you want prayers, if you want to get the help from people, you want someone to show happiness towards you, that's fine. But if they don't, we shouldn't be offended by that. But the third grade here is that, like giving kindred, like giving to family, like a mother naturally gives to her children without wanting any return. This is the highest grade, and this is where we see that the level of morality and helping society should be at that level. That we should help others with that kind of love that mother gives to her child, never thinking that she wants anything in return. It should be solely motivated out of love. But here the Promised Messiah has explained that it is possible that when someone is showing a moral quality, when they're doing something good, it can actually turn out to be excessive if it is not properly properly given to the to the extent or limit that it should be limited to. And I'll give you an example. That if we are to forgive our child or forgive our employer because we think that it would be better for them, then we understand that okay, we're going to forgive them. We'll be kind to them. But if we continue doing this and they're not reforming, and they're abusing they're abusing you, then this this graciousness that we're giving, kindness that we're giving, is going to turn out to be something of a corruption for their morality, and it will turn out something bad. And the Promised Messiah gave the analogy of this like the rain that comes to the crops. Normal rain and even less rain can help many crops to develop and to their best. Now, if he said, if there is a heavy deluge like a flood, can destroy the crop. So similarly, we shouldn't be like that in our actions, where we're obsessive in it. And nowadays, in society, where of course we have to tread along that balance of how we deal with one another and also with our children in any society, to make them understand by giving them reasoning, by giving them explanation, and giving them your love and showing everything. But we shouldn't do to the extent that when they are doing something wrong, we are pleased with it, or we'll ignore that, to the extent that maybe it may lead them further away from their own understanding that they're doing something wrong. Of course, we as as parents or as grown-ups, or who have to take care of others, we have to do everything with a limited amount of persuasion. And we shouldn't, after the age of maturity, when a child grows up, we cannot abuse them. We cannot be physically punish them. We should have balance to that. So this is something we should look at. It's very important that we understand the finer aspects of morality, because otherwise morality can be on one extreme. You can look imbalanced. Another extreme, it looks very nice and beautiful, but then it can turn out to be something bad. The Promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam now explains in the philosophy of the teaching of Islam, the examples he gives in so much detail in this book, the philosophy of teaching of Islam. Whereas if a person can read it and go through it, not just like quickly, but go through it properly and then understand it, then they can start to understand how that they can implement it in their life. And that's why I'm trying in this Dars al Quran to give an outline only of how the Promised Messiah explains everything, so that if we go ahead and we read it and we try to understand it, because in our perhaps maybe what I say in English may not go deep inside as if you read it yourself in your own, and maybe in the original Urdu or in the translation in English or the translation in French or Arabic or any other language. So now the thing is that why is it important to study this book and understand the step by step? Like anything, I was thinking over this point, and I'm currently reading it now, after reading it before sometimes on my own, the book from beginning to end, and I'm reading it for you from beginning to end so that I can give you the explanation. I'm on page 64, and I would like to explain here that if we understand, when we want to learn anything, there is always stages, and this is very easy and fundamental thing that everyone knows. And if we are going to take a course, we take a course and we always learn the basics before we take the next step. If we don't learn those basics when we take a test, we will not be able to pass that test, or we have to do anything practical. We will not be able to practically follow out what we were instructed in. So that's why I explained that sometimes a person is in a moral category, which they claim to be in, but they're still not completely out of the some areas where they may be lower areas of morality. They're still behaving in not moral in those areas. Then they can be really in this area, this higher level. Now, the same goes with if you're trying to work in trying to understand learn any new craft. And I'm giving this example of an aircraft mechanic that in aviation, like for instance, if you're going to aviation school, I mean, if you're going to learn to be an aircraft mechanic, an engineer, and you have to know all the aspects about it, and your task is that maybe you're in the area, your area is just the airplane engine itself and how it connects with the entire plane, right? So you have skipped out, and you have, I don't know, you've got a fake degree or something, and you skipped out how to really figure out how to, to make that engine. You've been given the parts and everything, and your task is to build that engine. So obviously, if you haven't gone through all the stages of learning that engine, when you have to put gasoline in the plane and you have to turn on the plane to start it, and see how how it connects with the rest of the plane, and all the mechanics and the computer, and how it all interrelates with the plane. So if the engine doesn't even work, but maybe some other aspects of it are connected and this and that, but the engine is not working, then the plane will not be able to fly, and it will not be able to move. So that whole body will not be able to move. So similarly, when we look at the subject of morality as taught by the promised Messiah, alayhi salatu wasalam, there is in understanding that we have to develop our morals, which are like the soul, or which are the soul and the spirit of the body. And if we do not correct them, we do not make them correlated with our body and work properly with it, then we will not be able to get onto moral heights, and we will not be able to move to moral heights, and then we will not be able to go higher to spiritual heights. Just like the plane, the physical plane I was talking to you about, it can maybe work and function, but it won't be able to take off. So for that being said, it's very important to understand these levels and go through them. And the Prophet ﷺ, he first started by explaining the first level, which is nafsi amara, which is he says is the source of all natural states. And he quotes from the Holy Quran, "Inna nafsa la ammaratum bisu." That is, the soul is surely prone to enjoin evil. Surah Yusuf, verses 54. This means that it is characteristic of, he says, it is a characteristics of human self that it incites man to evil and is opposed to his attainment of perfection and to his moral state, and urges him towards undesirable and evil ways. Thus, the propensity towards evil and impertinence is a human state which predominates over the mind of a person before he enters upon the moral state. So there is this state, natural state, which is of impulses, which is not convinced. It doesn't ever wants to be convinced, that it will go and become moral, go to the moral state and leave this state, And he says that this moral state, this is the natural state, so long as he is not guided by reason and understanding, but follows his natural bent in eating, drinking, sleeping, walking, anger, and provocation, like the animals. So his moral state is only concerned with these basic things, which is like a state of animals, if all we are concerned about is eating, drinking, sleeping, and this. Then the next stage is nafsi lawama, is where he says from the Holy Quran, and he quotes, "Wala uqsimu bin nafsil lawama." That is, I call to witness the reproving self. That is to say, I call to witness the self that reproves itself for every vice and intemperance. This reproving self is the second source of human state from which the moral state is generated. At this stage, man ceases to resemble the animals. Calling to witness is for the purpose of doing it honor, as if by advancing from the state of the self that is prone to evil and arriving at the state of the reproving self. So here he describes that the consciousness is awakened, and the man or the woman has now started to realize about the things that they have done, that they have perhaps are not good, they are immoral, and we shouldn't be doing, and then they feel remorseful. This is called the reproving self. And at this stage, he says that it's very weak, and it's like a child who tries to walk and can't walk because it has weakness in his legs. And that is in that stage, a person is trying their best and fighting with their natural impulses all the time to get the strength to stand on its own with these moral qualities, but all the time is feeling remorse. And then the next stage is nasfi mutmaina. That is that the spiritual state of man, where in the Holy Quran it says, Ya ayyutuhan nafsul mutma'inna, Arji'i ila rabbiki radiyatam mardiya fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati. And then Hazur says that that is, O soul at rest, that has found comfort in God, return to thy Lord, thou well pleased with him, and he well pleased with thee. Now join my chosen servants and enter into my garden. This is the stage when the soul of a person being delivered from all weaknesses is filled with spiritual powers and establishes a relationship with God Almighty, without whose support it cannot exist. A water flowing downward from a height on account of its volume and the absence of any obstruction rushes with great force. In the same way, the soul at rest flows towards God. So he's saying that at this stage, we're so strong that just like a rushing water moves downstream without anything to block it, the same way our soul rushes towards God. Because we have been so uplifted by him and so transformed in through going through this exercises of reforming oneself, that we are in this state of being in pleasure with God all the time, and not ever wanting to do anything against God's will and against our moral instincts inside. And trying to put here everything to make you understand is that because there's a lot here, I tried to sort of summarize as much as possible and not get too far off. Here, the promised Messiah, he has said that the development of the soul is very important, and he said that the reasons why a person has to regulate their first natural state, like eating, drinking, and so on and so forth, because it has an impact on the morals. It has an impact on the soul, just like the soul has an impact on the morals. And he gave an example of how when a person has emotions, they hear the sad news, they start weeping. This is the inner soul having effect on the physical outer um, body. And he also gave the example of that if someone is physically, if they're hurt, physically hit, they have a pain, and that pain induces inside their soul the emotion of weeping. And so they both play a very important role with each other, and that's why the inner soul has to be taken care of through our formation of it through our good actions. And the promised Messiah ﷺ explained that that inner soul will be at one stage raised in a new body out of this soul after the day of judgment. Day of judgment, we don't know when that day of judgment is, by the way. It's not not to our understanding of that time, but that time when there will be a development, he said, will happen within ourselves. And that is why we have to first take from the basic stage of development. We have to manage our eating, manage our basic habits of living together, marrying our children, this and that. We have to, in our society, we have to manage this because it has a direct link of how our soul is being formed. And the same way, when Hazur mentioned that the same way the fetus is developing and will develop into a human baby before it is given birth, the mother has to take a lot of care in order to make sure that that child will healthily grow in the body. same way, we have to take care of our soul so that it will give birth to a pure soul in the hereafter. And everything that we do, all of our actions will react upon and make up that the healthy soul, or make it not a healthy soul. And Hazur said that in the light of the teachings, we have to take care of those basic teachings from beginning, and the natural disposition of the self, and our and then go to the second level of moral disposition, and develop those even higher and higher. And that is why it's very important. He said that just like the in the fetus, the the soul is latent inside. It's actually inherent inside, and it comes to life at a certain point in the womb of the mother. Similarly, Hazur said at a certain stage, there is a development within, like the the pregnancy stage. There is a spiritual stage of development in man, which he said that just like the stage of the fetus, when it goes through up to 9 months, he said that also there's a development at a certain stage where if there's a consciousness which is awoken in a person, then that soul can come to life. And that's why it can come to life in this very life. And that's why I'm saying that it's very important in the beginning to understand how the levels start, and how we should correct everything from beginning. And we should not have imbalances in our in taking care of our manners, and taking care of other people, and our relationship with God. There should be a balance between all of them, between how we take care of ourselves, how we take care of others and interact with others, and how we relate with God, because they all play a very important role in developing our soul. And at this point, when we understand the teachings that the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam has explained for us to to learn, to begin with this moral reformation, which is three-staged. The first stage is what he calls good manners. And when he starts, when you start reading his book, and then he gives references from the Holy Quran, then he starts from those references, which are the good manners. And he said that those are the code the codes that regulate the natural conditions of a barbarianism, or like an animal. We're like sort of like wild, but we're supposed to regulate that natural state. And he said, like eating, like drinking, like marriage, etc., 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 and establishes them at a level, at a just level of social values, and rescues them from an animal existence. So the verses which are mentioned in the Holy Quran at this stage, Surah Al-Nisa, verses 24, about which I mentioned, I think, in last week, about how the Holy Quran talks about what is forbidden for you to marry, what is right for you to marry, who is not right for you to marry. And then it goes into the Al-Nisa verse 40, that it's unlawful for you to inherit women against their will, so you should not force women into marriage. These are basic controlling at the level of our natural impulses. We should control them first. And then he said that, you see, and that's why I'm saying, without controlling this and thinking, oh no, these are high morals. If I don't think to myself, I don't force a woman into marriage, I'm a good Muslim. This is a very basic thing. This is very basic thing. The others are much higher and much more honorable. For instance, and then there are other things like committing not to commit adultery, um, and also not, like I mentioned last week, about not killing your children. These are very basic things of barbaric things that we should control, we should eliminate, and we should not do them. Uh, and then he says that even about when you're going into a home, going in and out of a house, when you salute the people, you should knock the door. You should. These are very basic things, but these are the things which we should know. They should become a part of our life before we understand that we should have a higher. You know, it doesn't look nice if a person is so uh, spiritual and he's so highly, you know, educated in the field of religion, but he's not able to respect the you know, the privacies of other people and come in a proper way with a proper etiquettes. um, and then about salam, that you should give salam, to giving back when you meet someone. This is also the basic level we should follow. um, and then about drinking and gambling, that these are the work of Satan's handiwork, which is mentioning Al Maida, that we should stay away from these things if we want to prosper. This is also a basic thing that we should learn to eliminate before we can get on to the next level. And it makes complete sense that a thing like drugs and alcohol, which take you out of your ability to even, you know, function at a very uh, low level human being, just to eat and to do things. You even lose even that when you get into these things. You even start losing the ability, and people lose the ability even to earn for themselves. They lose the ability to take care of themselves because they have lost so much of their senses, because they have gone so far with you know, drugs. And in fact, drugs are such in you know, such a dangerous and harmful thing, because it excites the inner, you know, it arouses your inner self that is prone towards evil, and it keeps you away from, you know, from the natural normal things that even just animals do. uh, and then about the levels of cleanliness, this is also mentioned, very important, that our cleanliness is a, you know, the cleanliness, it is a great reflection on ourselves. That's why if you look at and Hazur mentioned here, the verses which talk about keeping the streets clean, keeping yourself clean, keeping taking frequent baths, so on, and you're keeping your house clean. These are things which are very basic, but they're very important for your health, your spiritual health as well. They impact upon how you feel morally and how you feel good. And that is why, if we look at the prayer itself, why we do wuzu before. This is a very important aspect. If we're just doing wuzu because, oh, we feel good, this and that, yeah, but we should be doing with the, you know, with this intention that we are trying to inspire and waken our inner consciousness, and then we go to prayer, and we can offer the prayer and with more humility, and try to seek God's understanding. And even the said that even giving food to people and helping people, and even helping giving food to animals and birds. This is a quotation which the Promised Messiah is also mentioned here. So in the end, I would just finish here before I finish that tomorrow in my Darsul Quran, I'll cover the next part. And the Promised Messiah has at this stage has divided now the moralities. When you start going to the next level of morality, there are two parts. The first part is that one, that restrain from evil, and the second is a moral quality, enable you to do good things. That's the second part. So first part is that we should restrain, So we should figure out that we are straining from all these evils, and what are those things? Tomorrow, inshallah, I'll discuss those. The second part is that of doing good. So you can see now, if you get the first part right and you follow that, how you can then move to this second part and apply it in your life. So may Allah help us to understand this. Please pray for me that may I be able to have the ability to explain everything to you properly, and that we all can improve upon ourselves, myself included, and we can get the maximum benefit from the month of Ramadan. I really do. As we are entering, the second part of this month, or the second half of this month. We don't have that much time left. It's leaving us. So let's try our best to, see how we can benefit from this month, so that um, we don't let this month just pass by, and we don't end up getting anything out of it. Let's try to capture this month for our benefit, so we can have some moral awakening and some spiritual awakening. Jazakumullah, asnul jaza. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.